starting a new series today called What I Really Want. And I bet if I asked you right now to tell me one thing that you really, really want, I'd get a lot of different answers. Like grades that show our effort, a healthy body, or a solid group of friends. But if we're honest, I think we'd all probably admit that sometimes the stuff that we really want is kind of the stuff we know might not be the best for us. There's actually a word to describe that. A word that explains what it feels like to really want something, especially something that might not be good for us. That word is temptation. Temptation simply means the desire to do something that we know is wrong or unwise. In other words, temptation means wanting to do something that may not be the best for us. Maybe you've heard that word before, and if you have, you've probably heard it used in a negative way. That's because so often when we think about temptation, we think it means doing something wrong, doing everything wrong, saying bad words, stealing, cheating, something we do in secret, something we do when adults aren't around. See what I mean? When we think about temptation, we think it's about our behavior. We think it's about our choices. We think it's about what we shouldn't do. But look back with me at how we define temptation. Temptation means the desire to do something that we know is wrong or unwise. In other words, temptation means wanting to do something that may not be the best for us. Let me show you what I mean. Check this out.
Wait. When I get back, then you can have it, okay? But you gotta wait. Be right back. Wait. Good girl. You did so good. Yes, you're a good girl.
These poor dogs, all they wanted was to eat the treats that were put in front of them. See, temptation isn't the thing we do or don't do. Temptation is the desire to want to do a thing. It's a feeling we get when we really, really want something that may not be the best for us. But I think we all know what it feels like to be tempted to do something that we know we shouldn't do. Have you ever wanted to not show up on Zoom for class? Watch shows or YouTube channels that you're not supposed to watch. Tell a lie, download an app your parents told you not to get, sneak your phone into your room at night, just break the rules in general. That kind of temptation has the potential to lead us down a path that may not be the best for us. And the consequences, well, they can be harsh. You might get grounded, lose your phone, get detention, or even get kicked off the team. And that's just if you get caught. If you don't get caught, you still might find yourself facing guilt, embarrassment, stress, pain, or even worse. See, giving into temptation has consequences. And after you give into temptation that isn't good for you, you can end up with a lot of questions. Maybe you've been there, and if you have, you've probably found yourself wondering about things like, am I a bad person because I was tempted? Or am I a bad person because I gave into the temptation? Why do I want to do things that I know I shouldn't do? Is God mad at me if I give into temptation that isn't good for me? And why doesn't God help me out here? Those questions are all great, honest questions. They're questions that I found myself asking myself more than once. And that's because temptation is difficult. It has this way of confusing us. It can convince us that those not so great things might be what's best for us. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to keep giving into that. If temptation is something we're all going to face, I want to learn how to face it well. So experiencing temptation is unfortunately a part of life. It's been that way nearly since the beginning of time. In fact, this struggle goes all the way back to the first humans ever created. In Genesis, the first book of the Bible, we learn that God made everything and saw that it was good. Then he made Adam and Eve, and he saw that they were very good. Adam and Eve had a special relationship with God. They walked and talked with him every day. There was no insecurity, guilt, comparison, anxiety, or jealousy in their world. Can you even imagine that? So what changed? Well, something came between Adam and Eve and their closeness with God. Let me explain. God had given Adam and Eve the freedom to do anything except one thing, and that was eat fruit from a specific tree. So you think with all the freedom, Adam and Eve wouldn't have even noticed that fruit on one of the trees was off limits. Well, that's not what happened. Satan came in and messed everything up. He told them that God was keeping them from something good for them. Adam and Eve chose to believe Satan. They chose not to trust God, and so they ate the fruit. Adam and Eve's choice broke their closeness with God. Their sin put distance between them and God. And what's worse, now we as people have something in our hearts that causes us to distrust God too. And that's why there's this battle inside of us between what we think is best versus what God tells us is best. Because we struggle to trust God, because we struggle to trust that God has our best interest in mind, and the conversation on temptation in the Bible doesn't stop there. So many of the writers in the Bible talked about it a lot. And I think that's because God knew it would be a pretty big deal. James was one of these writers. A fun fact about James, he also happened to be Jesus' brother. James wrote to Christians about issues that affected their everyday lives. He talked about how to handle them in tough times, how to control your words, how to treat others, and how to understand the temptations that might be happening in your life. So let's go ahead and take a look about what James had to say. James was helping us understand where temptation comes from. And very clearly, he said that God is not the one who tempts us. Temptation comes from within us. It comes from that desire that started all the way back with Adam and Eve. That desire to do what we think is best rather than what God says is best. So we're tempted by our own desires. And we've got to learn to deal with those desires in a good and healthy way. I bet you're wondering why. Well, because James told us that there are consequences if we don't. And they have the potential to hurt us or drag us away from God. And the longer we let them remain, the bigger and bigger they get, the harder they are to deal with. And the more difficult they become to resist. The bigger the consequences are, the harder it is to face them. See, God wants what is good for us. He really, really, really wants what's best for us. When we choose to trust God and follow Him and His way instead, that's just better for our lives. And in other words, we can experience God's best for us when we resist temptation. And here's why this matters. Temptation is something we'll face for the rest of our lives, in big ways and small ways. It's something we'll deal with a lot. So what does this mean for you right now as a middle schooler when you find yourself faced with temptation to cheat on a test, lie to your parents, or watch that video on your phone? What are you supposed to do? The first thing, practice identifying what's tempting you. Think about the last year when you may have made some bad choices. What was the temptation attached to that made you make that choice? What was the reason you wanted to do the thing that you knew you shouldn't do? What made you really, really want it? Was it popularity, being cool, taking the easy way out? One of the first steps to resisting temptation is identifying what it is. Then remember that God wants what's best for you. You can trust God. He doesn't make rules because He's on a power trip. He isn't holding out on you. In fact, it's the opposite. He wants you to resist temptation, not because He wants your life to be boring or uncool or lonely. He wants you to resist it because He has something better for you. Following His way is what He really, really wants for us. You have the power right now to decide to deal with your desires in a good and healthy way. You have the choice today to choose God's best for yourself and not let those temptations grow stronger in your life. You have the choice to recognize temptation and trust that it's not God's best for you.